30 days ago to this day, the State Department under Secretary Blinken wrote a letter to the Israeli government that was also signed by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, which advised the Israelis that the U.S. government believed that they were purposely blocking humanitarian aid, especially into northern Gaza, but also doing what they could to ensure that aid doesn't get to any part of Gaza, including food, clean water, and medicine. And the American government noted that any attempts to block humanitarian aid or to siege a part of a country or an entire country and starve it to death is a violation of international law and human rights law, and that under American law, a law enacted by Congress, signed by the president, the United States is barred legally from providing weapons to countries that use those weapons to engage in human rights abuses or violations of international law. And the United States government said, and we're giving you 30 days to show significant improvements in all of these areas. Otherwise, we would consider an arms embargo. Now, as soon as I saw that the 30 days came after the election, of course I knew that nobody took this letter seriously, that it was just a political stunt designed to try and deceive young voters who were disillusioned with U.S. support for the Israeli destruction of Gaza and Arab and Muslim voters that they needed in Michigan to try and believe, like as a latch-this effort, that the Biden administration was willing to put limits on Israel. But they did it very publicly yet again. They said, here are our red lines. If you don't meet these in 30 days, we're going to strongly consider cutting off ties. There's nobody who thinks that the Israelis made any progress in any of this. In fact, the Israelis since then have ensured that it's all worsened. There's less aid than ever getting into northern Gaza. There's fewer trucks entering that are humanitarian nature. The IDF is purposely blocking it. They're ethnically cleansing Gaza, northern Gaza, by forcing everyone to leave and shooting people who don't. And even American outlets, which are very reluctant to criticize Israel, are acknowledging that the Israelis simply did not do what the Americans demanded in this letter. Here from the Washington Post yesterday, November 12th, quote, the U.S. demanded that Israel surge aid to Gaza. Little changed. Last month, the Biden administration gave Israel an unusually stark ultimatum: improve aid access to hunger-ravaged Gaza in the next 30 days or risk losing some American military support. With the deadline set to expire Tuesday, humanitarian organizations say Israel has failed to follow through, bringing the Palestinian enclave to the brink of mass starvation. Quote, things are going to go from bad to worse, UN humanitarian coordinator Munad Hadi told the Washington Post on Friday after a trip to Gaza's besieged north. He described the situation facing civilians as, quote, beyond imagination. With the deadline here, authorities in Israel have touted their progress. Another crossing into Gaza has been opened. A polio vaccination campaign has been completed. The number of trucks entering Gaza is up from last month's record low. A few have reached hospitals in Gaza's northernmost cities, which Israel has sealed off from nearly all outside assistance for more than a month. But a post-analysis, a Washington Post analysis based on interviews with more than a dozen humanitarian workers and officials, found that Israel has largely failed to comply with the three main demands of the U.S. letter: surging humanitarian aid across the enclave, resuming access for commercial trucks, and ending the isolation of the north. So the Israelis simply didn't do it. They didn't pretend to do it. Even a week ago, before the election, the State Department admitted that there was no sign they were moving there, but they said, oh, we're going to wait the 30 days. We've gone over this letter before. Here it is. It was written on October 31st. It was written to the then Minister of Defense that Netanyahu has now fired, Yoav Gallant, and Rod Dramer, the Minister of Strategic Affairs, signed by Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin. And we went over the various demands that this letter included, including all these different attempts to try to demand further humanitarian aid surged into all parts of Gaza, but especially into northern Gaza. Now, a group of aid organizations, including the one run by John McCain's widow, Cindy McCain, Oxfam, who's been warning forever that Gaza is on the brink of famine, that many, many children and other people have died of hunger already. They united and said, here's all the data proving that none of this was improved. And so yesterday, the AP's Matt Lee went to the State Department in order to badger the State Department spokesman about what everybody knows that they're lying about, which is that they sent this letter as a stunt for the election, never meant it, and now they have to stand up and lie and say that Israel is delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza, even though everyone in the world knows they're not. And here's how that went.
As you've heard me say, and as you've heard Matt and the Secretary say previously, if we don't see steps being taken, we, of course, will appropriately enforce U.S. law. But
correct
today,
me if I'm wrong, isn't that what you guys said a month ago?
that is what we said a month ago, and that is why we laid out.
And they have not yet met them, because you say that they have taken some steps, but more needs to be made. In other words, they have not met the criteria by the deadline, and you are giving them a pass. Is that, I don't understand. There's no other way to look at it.
No, I don't think that is true. That letter was specific about some specific areas where we wanted to see them take some additional steps.
Have you seen those steps?
We have seen some of those steps being taken. Yes, yes.
It didn't say some, it said all, right?
Matt, the point is, more than any singular step, we outlined a number of steps that we wanted to see taken. Right. What matters most is not just a specific action or a specific item, but the totality of the progress that we see. I don't understand why you sent the letter in the first place, but I'll let others have a crack at it. The point is, Matt, that we want to see the totality of the humanitarian situation improve, and we think some of these steps will allow the conditions for that to continue to progress. Go ahead.
I mean, people like this, who are employed by the State Department, have been standing up every day and defending everything the Israelis have been doing in the destruction of Gaza. And to me, these people deserve Nuremberg trials. I don't understand what could possibly be worth it in the world to stand up every day and lie for the Israelis and be humiliated by the Israelis in front of the entire world, and then have to go and stand there and have everybody know that all these demands that you made of Israel were not complied with. Now, the reality is the U.S. is not really demanding anything. Everybody knows, including the Americans, that the Israelis aren't going to do it. The Americans don't care at all. But the entire theater is so sickening, given that what they're doing is denying and justifying and covering up for what is clearly the most horrific war against humanity and the most atrocious immorality of any war this century, at least. Here on CNN, and again, this is starting to break into the mainstream given how transparent it is. Here's CNN yesterday reporting on all this.
Israeli President Herzog at another critical point in the war against Hamas in Gaza. Today is the deadline that the Biden administration had set for the Israeli government to significantly increase the amount of aid reaching Gaza. In a joint statement, 8 humanitarian aid organizations say that the Israeli government has not only failed to do that, but also, quote, to take actions that dramatically worsened the situation on the ground. CNN.
Think how bad that has to be, that for CNN to say that not only did the Israelis ignore the letter and refuse to even make progress toward any of the demands, they went in the opposite direction. And they ensured that those humanitarian crises worsened, which is exactly what has happened.
Kylie Atwood is live in Washington with the very latest. And Kylie, if today is the deadline, what happens now?
It's a great question, Kate, and it's one that we are waiting to hear from the Biden administration. As you said, this is an assessment that 8 humanitarian and aid organizations did, because this letter was a public letter. It was from the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, to their Israeli counterparts, making these demands, more than a dozen very clear demands about what Israel had to do in terms of taking steps to allow more humanitarian support into Gaza. Now, what these aid organizations are saying is that based on what the United States laid out, their assessment is effectively that Israel failed this test, that they did not live up to the demands that the U.S. was making. On all of the demands that the U.S. made, they said that they failed to meet the criteria, and on none of them did they see full or significant progress from Israel. As you said, across the board, these aid organizations felt that Israel actually made the humanitarian situation in northern Gaza over the last month worse.
And here's the letter that the aid organizations wrote. There you see the names of them, and it essentially just goes through each of the different demands that the United States made. And for example, here's just a kind of representative chart where they list all the demands of the United States government, what the U.S. government called requirements, and then there's the grade, the record the note at the end, which is either red that they haven't done it at all, yellow that they've done it a little bit, but still more is needed, and green to show that they've complied. You see that there are no greens. They're almost all red because the United States demands were never intended to be demands. They were intended to be an election ploy designed to fool voters into thinking that they cared in the slightest about the wars of the war crimes and wars against humanity that they've been enabling with the Israelis in Gaza. Here, I'm going to have you take a look at this, which is the testimony of Nizam Mahmoud, who is a doctor who has spent time recently in Gaza, and I just want you to take a listen to what it is that he's describing under oath before the British Parliament.
I was operating on one young girl one night who died not long afterwards, and I can't even begin to describe her injuries. But when I'd finished operating on her, an ophthalmologist was trying to take out her left eye, which was just pulp. And he was a lovely, gentle man, maybe 5 years older than me. And he was, while he was working, he was just saying, yeah, when they came in February, they got all of us who were still here, they put our hands behind our backs, tied them up, put a hood over our heads, made us stand for 10 hours, beat us, cursed us in Arabic, humiliated us. And then some were taken away, some were killed, some were detained, some were released. We had a medical student who worked with us, who described how the women had all been lined up and been told to strip down to their underwear and made to stand for hours like that, which is deeply, deeply humiliating, particularly in that culture. And then when they told her she could go, they wouldn't give her her clothes back, so she had to run through the streets like that, which for her was extremely traumatic. So there's a consistent theme of attack, humiliation, aggression against people who are simply trying to do their job, to try and help people.
Last night we interviewed the American journalist Jeffrey Lafredo, who described his own Jeremy Lafredo, who described his own humiliation that he endured at the hands of the Israelis. And obviously, given that he was an American journalist, they were much more limited in what they could do, and yet they were completely sadistic in the kinds of things to which they subjected him. That was the interview that we put on Locals for now. We're going to try and put it on this show as soon as we have some time. Now, I just want to show you, and there's been some really horrific videos of that same person actually who testified, that British doctor, about how common it was for children who were blown up as part of Israeli bombs to be alive and be on the ground, and then a drone would come and shoot them on purpose, or snipers would shoot them. There's been a lot of evidence about that as well. Here is a Gazan journalist who lives in Gaza, whose name is Abu Bakr Abed, and he's been writing articles for the news site Drop Site about what he's been experiencing. He was on Breaking Points with Ryan Grimm, who's from Drop Site, and described what it is that he's been experiencing in northern Gaza.
Just, I'm curious on a personal level, if you don't mind me asking. It's mid-afternoon there now in Gaza. What have you eaten so far today? And like, what is your hope for what you might have before the day is over?
You can see how the electricity was cut off. So this is one of the main things that is happening right now in Gaza. So it's very expected that I'm talking to you. You are still in the light, and I'm hoping, and I'm like a human being. I'm a human being. I'm supposed to be a human being, and I'm just like wishing, hoping for a day instead of you, like for a moment, like give me like a moment of your life, of your worst day to me, so that I can feel at least that I'm a human. But what we've eaten so far is that, again, it's just like some loaves of bread. You have some loaves of bread, if you have it even, and they are made by, bug-infested flour, of course, because there is no flour that has been allowed to enter the strip. But at the same time, we have, like, as I wrote in this piece, we have some, like, started this local plate, and with some olive oil. So that's what we eat every single day, and it's just one time. So we are making a process here. We're making a schedule here. Like we minimize things, so everyone has a pot.
I mean, they just don't have food, and the reason they don't have food is because at the beginning of the war, the Israelis said we're not going to allow food, water, medicine, or electricity into the Gaza Strip, and that's exactly what they proceeded to do. They're starving populations because they want them to force them out so that they can destroy it and rebuild and have the Israelis take it over. And those people know that if they leave, they will never be able to go back to their homes again. They'll be refugees for the rest of their lives. And you could, just read every day. You can watch every day people in Gaza, aid groups, describing that they've never seen anything like that. Western doctors and nurses who go there come back and are completely traumatized by the things they're seeing. And of course, it's not like any other war. Even in Lebanon, which the Israelis are now trying to repeat what they're doing in Gaza and in Beirut, at least people can flee. In Gaza, there's no fleeing. It's an extremely densely packed strip of land. And it's one of the most densely packed places in the world. Those people are locked in. Even the Lebanese are fleeing into Syria and into Turkey and other countries. There's no leaving Gaza. This is what they've been living with for more than a year now. Constant bombardment, killing, people being wounded, no hospitals functioning, every university, every school blown up. Most hospitals completely out of function. Even the ones that can function don't have even the most basic needs. People are being operated on without anesthesia, all the things that you've heard, and it's only getting worse. And in northern Gaza, where there's no journalists permitted, as you see, they cut off the electricity all the time. If a journalist tries and goes and reports critically on what's happening, they did what they did to Jeremy Lafredo, which is try and intimidate him by suggesting he was arrested for terrorism. They put him in solitary confinement. They beat a Palestinian prisoner next to him. If you haven't seen that interview, you can see it on our Locals platform. And as I said, we're going to try and put it on the air within the next few days. But if you're an American citizen, this is something that is your war. You own this war. Your government has been paying for it, has been arming it, has been doing everything it can to isolate itself diplomatically to protect Israel, even while the entire world turns against it and increasingly regards it as a genocide, as a horrific war against humanity, a crime against humanity. And there's no way anymore to conclude that it is. And to watch the State Department so cynically exploit and manipulate all of this by pretending to send a letter that you have 30 days after the election to improve on this, otherwise we're going to cut off arms, and then have the Israelis just so blatantly not only not improve on it, but make it worse, and have these utterly vacant sociopaths who work for the U.S. government stand up and lie when everyone knows they're lying and say, no, the Israelis have made a little bit of progress, enough for us to keep arming them, I don't have words for it any longer. I mean, whatever rage and disgust you feel probably isn't sufficient. And at some point, the full record, the comprehensive record of what's been going on in northern Gaza, what's been going on in the rest of the Gaza, how many people have actually been killed, the destruction, the sadism that's going on in Israeli detention camps, all of that's going to emerge. It's going to be cemented into history. And I think everybody is going to have to account for what it is that they did during this time, especially the government, which is the United States, that has done the most to ensure that it can continue to happen. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.